Greetings, friends. This is the midweek devotional for University United Methodist Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's Wednesday, November 25th, 2020. You were likely watching this the day before Thanksgiving. Whenever or wherever you are watching this or tuning in from, welcome. I'm John Fletcher. I'm a member here at University. Where am I this Thanksgiving week? Well, I'll tell you for the first time in a long time, I'm spending it here in Baton Rouge. Usually, in most other years, I would be in Oklahoma City right now at my sister's house, and we would be preparing a turkey and various side dishes, and I'd be there with my partner Alan, and my father would come, and we would have a lot of family there, and it was a wonderful time. However, this year is, of course, different. A lot of people in my Oklahoma family, they live with compromised immune systems, and the pandemic is raging across the country, so the risk to them, we judge, is just too great. And so, like so many of you, this year, my celebration is going to be very small. It's just Alan and me in our little house. I think the last time that it was just Alan and me for Thanksgiving was way back in like 2001 or maybe 2002. We were both still in graduate school in Minneapolis. We'd at that time been together only for a few years, and we were doing that thing that you do with, a spouse where you're kind of trying to navigate what it is to live with this other very different adult person who is kind of like a roommate, but kind of like family, and not sort of either, but something new. And so we had a lot of tests during those first years, and Thanksgiving was one of those tests, preparing Thanksgiving together. You see, first of all, I am a really picky omnivore. I mean, there are like at least five foods that everyone in the whole world loves, but I don't. Popcorn, peanut butter, onions, jalapenos, peppers, and stuff like. Really, there's more than five. I just say five because I'm kind of embarrassed by it. But trust me, there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way when you're trying to prepare Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, think of onions. Onions are in everything. And Alan, who is a very good cook, he would say, you know what? I will chop up the onions very small. You'll never notice them, but I always notice them. I always notice them. The other complication with Thanksgiving is that Alan is mostly vegan. And in case you don't know, vegan is kind of a step beyond vegetarian. Vegetarians refrain from eating meat. Vegans tended to refrain from eating most anything that comes from an animal. So no dairy, no gelatin, no eggs, things like that. Thanksgiving can thus be kind of tricky. Now, here's the thing. What's funny is that the stereotype for vegan in popular culture, and I will say this is a stereotype that I had prior to meeting Alan, was that vegans were people who were constantly judging anyone who eats meat. That they sat there and if you ate like a steak or drank some milk or something, they would judge you and lecture you and stuff like that. And here's the thing, really quickly, I figured out Alan has never lectured anyone that I know of about their food choices, right? Just never in my experience has that been part of what Alan does. Instead, what tends to happen is that when I mention that Alan is a vegan or Alan mentions that he is vegan, what I have seen more of is people who are not themselves vegan. They start to pepper him with questions and even sort of challenges things like, well, so you do what? You don't eat cheese? What about honey? You'd eat honey, right? Even though that comes from bees, huh? Well, you wear leather, don't you? Or, not everyone can afford this plant-based diet of yours. It's not healthy for everyone. Now, mind you, Alan has not been arguing for this. He just mentioned that he's vegan and so on. And really, Alan has just been amazingly patient. Every time something like that has happened, he answers questions in a way that diffuses tension and really sort of undoes that stereotype they have in their heads. He says, it's just my choice. I know it's not for everyone. He does not judge people for eating what they eat. I know this because, again, I had that stereotype and I peppered him with those same kinds of questions and challenges early on. And he was very patient with me. Eventually, I got over the notion that his ethical decisions about food had anything to do with me or that they were any of my business. Our joke as a couple has always been that Alan is a vegan and I'm Methodist, and we get along because we don't try to convert each other. Alan is not and has never been a person of faith, right? He's not a religious person. He does not identify with an organized religion. And really, in that he's joined a growing segment of American population, the nuns, right? They're called nuns because on surveys, which religion do you identify with? They check none, right? Now, it's not that these nuns are atheists. Some are, but a lot of them do profess a belief in higher power. Many nuns I do identify as spiritual in some broad sense, but they're not interested in joining a church or a mosque or a temple of a synagogue. Quite the opposite. A large percentage of nuns, they did grow up on religion. I mean, this is not Al, this is just the nuns generally, right? Most of the nuns in America grew up in some variety of Christian and then left around high school or college. As soon as they could get away from the faith of their first families, they did. They are not unchurched, they are de-churched. Something drove them away. And statistically, sociologically, this begins with at least Generation X, children of the 70s and 80s, and it continues with the millennials, the children of the 90s and the early aughts. And now the current generation of young adults, Gen Z, are often the children of Generation X or of millennials. And these children manifest the effects of that sort of drift away from faith. For the first time, more people in the young adult demographic identify as none, more identify as none than identify as any other kind of religious affiliation. Now think about that for a sec. That's a huge challenge for us as a church. It's a challenge for us as Christians. It's frankly even a challenge for us just as religious people. Whereas religion, Christianity especially, used to be the default of the United States, now it's becoming one among many sort of belief, non-belief options. We see this trend even locally as we struggle to hold on to youth, adolescents, and young college students in our churches. And I'm sorry to say, I can see why they're leaving. For the past few generations, Christianity as a cultural and political force in our country, well, it's made itself awfully unattractive to a lot of people. Scholars from the Barna Group, that's an evangelical research organization, they did surveys in the aughts asking nuns. They asked them, what words do you associate when someone mentions Christian? What are the words that come to mind? The top three were anti-homosexual, hypocritical, and judgmental. Anti-homosexual, hypocritical, and judgmental. Now, like I know there's a diversity of beliefs. There's a whole debate and conversation about the place of human sexuality and stuff like that. Let's bracket that for a sec. Wherever you land on that debate yourself, I think you will agree, if you're a Christian, that anti-homosexual is not the main thing we want to be known as, let alone hypocritical or judgmental. It seems like the stereotype of Christians has become something like the stereotype of vegans that I used to have, that we're moral prudes that are constantly hectoring everyone else. I mean, really, if our religion were a brand, we would be lamenting a crisis of advertising, a crisis of marketing. As it is, we are facing a crisis of witness. Now that word, growing up, I grew up Southern Baptist, and witness, that for me meant approaching perfect strangers to ask some version of the key question, are you saved? Usually it went something like, if you were to die right now, are you 100% sure that you would go to heaven? Or, Pastor Katie in her sermon this last Sunday, she talked about getting one of those kind of questions from someone who did not realize that she was, of course, a Christian minister. Do you have a relationship with Jesus? For many nuns, for many in that nun category, these questions seem intrusive, presumptuous, manipulative. They seem like, well, dishonest sales tactics from a pretty shady organization. An organization that has shown itself not to represent love and generosity, but ignorance, judgmentalism, and hypocrisy. Now, look, I know I am a Christian, and I really want to be the first to say, not all Christians, right? I mean, our church is great, but I have to a certain extent, breathe past my need to defend and say, not all Christians. I have to listen. I have to accept that this is the impression of Christianity writ large for a lot of people. The question is then, what do we Christians do? How do we repair our witness to nuns? I mean, I'm really lucky. I am thankful that Alan was patient in asking me questions about my faith. He was and remains very supportive of my faith and my Christian work, and I have to think that part of what actually let us get along as well as we did was that joke. We didn't try to convert each other. Our conversations with each other early on were honest inquiries. We wanted to learn about each other's beliefs and values. We asked questions out of curiosity rather than as some rhetorical gotcha to win an argument, and we grew to know and honor the reality of each other's values, even if we didn't adopt them ourselves. Now, at this point, we've been together like 21 years. Let me tell you, I still enjoy eating meat. I do notice, though, that I do eat more plant-based foods than I did before I met Alan, and I do think about the ethics of the meat industry and my participation in it in ways that I never would have otherwise. And sometimes those thoughts lead me to make different choices than I otherwise would have done so. You will have to ask Alan about his beliefs nowadays, but I do know that he needs no lectures about how not all Christians are like that popular stereotype, because he knows me very well. He knows some of you all listening to this very well too. He's learned to sort of see past the stereotype given to him. We agreed, Alan and me, not to convert each other, and yet we have managed to transform each other. We've managed to be transformed by each other. I wonder, as we look with hope beyond this pandemic period, whether our Christian witness to the world must similarly change. Perhaps we should listen more. Perhaps we should learn to ask honest questions, to honor and support others and their ethics and beliefs, even as we maintain our own. Perhaps we even open ourselves to being transformed by the world. I know that's easier said than done. Long-term relationships. My long-term relationship with Alan, let me tell you, I have learned that it is as much a matter of patience and forbearance as it is about romantic feelings. Love for my partner is hard work. It is worthwhile work, but it's hard. And love for my neighbors, love for my enemies, that's even harder. Perhaps it's even as hard as a Thanksgiving dinner with extended family in pre-COVID times. Yeah, I am blessed, right? I love going to see my family. It's a joy for me. That is a thing that I value. I know that for many of us, however, visiting home for the holidays is some version of stressful to torturous. Think, for instance, of how Thanksgiving dinner has become a phrase to stand in for a difficult experience of bracing ourselves to endure those relatives that we can't stand. Uncle Bob is sure to go off on this or that political thing, which is going to set off Aunt Clarice, and maybe Grandpa's going to say something racist or sexist, and the youngest generations are going to bring like toys and styles and music and attitudes that we find baffling or grating or whatever. And I'm reminded when I consider that idea of a difficult Thanksgiving dinner, I'm reminded of how much of Jesus's witness on earth involved group meals. Now, some of these were, upper room meals with friends, or, he feeds the multitudes by sharing fish and loaves with them. But a lot, he was criticized for eating with sinners. He had dinner and supper a lot with his political and economic and even racial enemies. He crossed boundaries that way, and around those tables, Jesus had conversations, asking questions, answering patiently, never forcing or manipulating. Love is patient, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. What a high bar for some Thanksgiving dinners. What an even higher bar for just us in our conversations in life and online. How many conversations about politics, culture, and religion do not insist on their own way, are not irritable or resentful? I wonder if this is the kind of love, is the bar that we need to clear as Christians as we go out into a world of nones. Is this the transformation we're called to work in the world? Does that love, does clearing that bar begin this week, even this Thanksgiving? This moment as we navigate a divided country, this coming time as we renegotiate the church's place in a world of many beliefs. Wherever you are, wherever you find yourself today, this week, this month, this coming year, identify the people in your life whose beliefs and values you don't know well, that you perhaps have some stereotypes about. Thank God for putting them in your life. Find ways to love them, not to convert them, not to defeat them in an argument, but just to know them better. Find ways to undo your stereotypes about them. Ask God for the patience, peace, and wisdom necessary to do that. Strive to embody the love that bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And if you can, try to appreciate the family that you can be around, what they have taught you, how have they transformed you, how you are able to transform them. Make whatever compromises or sacrifices of love you can make in maintaining health. And one more thing, avoid tofurkey. Experience has shown me there are better vegan alternatives for Thanksgiving than tofurkey. Trust me, leftover tofurkey in the microwave, it vulcanizes. It becomes like a rubber hockey puck. But again, wherever you are this week, I hope that you have a happy Thanksgiving, and I hope that God blesses you and yours. Thank you for being part of my community. I'll see you later. Bye.